At 62, Julian Lennon shocked the world with words that carried the weight of decades. "I truly hated her." Few sentences could seem so simple, and yet hold such a universe of pain, conflict, and long-hidden secrets. Behind those words lay a lifetime shaped by family betrayals, fractured love, fame, and survival. It is the kind of story that challenges what people assume about rock royalty, a narrative that turns familiar myths on their head. What circumstances could lead the son of one of the most influential musicians in history to nurture a grudge for decades? How does the child of a legend grow up feeling abandoned, unseen, and rejected? To understand Julian Lennon, the man beyond the public eye, one must trace the journey that began the moment he stepped into a world of buried truths, opening doors that had long been closed. Before fame ever touched his life, Julian was simply a boy living under the long, impossible shadow of his father. He craved normalcy, ordinary joys, and simple affection, the kind of childhood every child deserves. From the outside, his life looked dazzling. The Lennon name glittered with fame and prestige, and people assumed he must have had everything. But inside his family home, happiness was elusive, almost foreign. When John Lennon left, it was not just a physical departure, it was the collapse of an entire world. He abandoned Julian and his mother, Cynthia, for another woman, leaving without explanations, goodbyes, or any sign of concern. Cynthia, left to pick up the pieces, struggled to maintain some semblance of stability. She sold treasured belongings just to put meals on the table, and the glamour of a celebrity childhood was replaced with the harsh realities of a modest flat, second-hand clothing, and an uncertain future. The burden of fame brought Julian no solace. At school, his surname marked him as a target. Classmates assumed he had everything, but inside, he felt hollow and alone. Bullied, mocked, and isolated, Julian often faced cruelty with no protection, as teachers assumed the son of a superstar required no shielding. Cynthia was his only defense, a mother determined to protect her child from the judgmental world. Through her efforts, Julian learned an early and painful truth. Legends shine brightly for outsiders, but living in their shadow comes with loneliness and longing. Despite this, he endured, concealing his pain beneath a quiet, resolute strength, determined never to reveal the fractures in his spirit. As Julian grew, the contrast between his public father and the private absence became ever starker. John Lennon, celebrated worldwide as a visionary of peace and love, offered little of either in his personal life. Crowds sang along to Imagine, envisioning harmony, while Julian experienced absence, broken promises, and a father who remained largely unknown. The pain intensified with the arrival of Sean, his younger half-brother, the child born into the love Julian never received. Publicly, John was lauded as a devoted parent, yet to Julian, it was a bitter irony. Songs of hope and unity, celebrated worldwide, sounded to him like a soundtrack to rejection. Rumors circulated that John had referred to Julian as a mistake, while Sean represented a child born from love. Whether true or exaggerated mattered little. The emotional scars were real, persistent reminders of being unwanted. The question, "Oh, is it really you?" haunted Julian throughout his life, an unspoken plea left unanswered. Cynthia tried to fill the void with love and support, but some losses were too deep to replace. The Lennon legacy dominated every corner of Julian's life. Posters, songs, and documentaries reinforced his father's omnipresence, a constant reminder of what he had lost. To the world, John Lennon was a legend. To Julian, he was the father who walked away. Over time, this bitterness quietly grew, shaping his personality and outlook. The father-son relationship, already fraught, remained tense and awkward. Post-divorce contact was minimal, often formal and strained. Few phone calls, occasional meetings, but nothing authentic, nothing that could heal a wound so deep. Meanwhile, John poured attention into Sean with Yoko Ono, creating a public image of devotion that Julian could only watch from the sidelines. Even in moments that seemed promising, a gifted guitar, a kind word, the hope always crumbled. Julian longed for guidance and connection, yet disappointment became his constant companion. Eventually, he stopped expecting reconciliation. The father he needed would never come. And so Julian built emotional walls, armor forged from years of neglect, to shield himself from further pain. Then came a day that altered everything. John Lennon had been shot. The world erupted in grief, mourning a fallen hero, while Julian's sorrow was quieter, heavier, profoundly personal. Days earlier, he had spoken with his father, sensing warmth and a fragile possibility for repair. That hope was extinguished instantly. There was no public farewell. Yoko Ono decreed there would be no memorial, only a call to honor John's dream of peace. Julian was left with fragments of memory, a void filled with regret. The last words his father spoke echoed in his mind, not because they were grand or profound, but because they signified the final end of any chance for healing. While the world mourned a legend, Julian mourned the father he never truly had. The emotional blow deepened when John's will was revealed. Almost the entirety of the estate went to Yoko Ono and Sean, with Julian barely acknowledged. Decades of yearning for recognition and love culminated in one cold document, confirming his worst fear. His father had never truly recognized him as a son. Following John's death, Yoko assumed control over the estate, the music, and the legacy. Julian, the firstborn, received only a small trust fund, a token devoid of affection. For him, the issue was never financial. It was about identity, about being erased from a story he had a right to inhabit, being written out of a legacy he should have helped shape. The sense of injustice ignited a long, determined battle, a struggle for identity, pride, and recognition. Julian embarked on years of legal wrangling, negotiating tirelessly, facing sleepless nights, public scrutiny, and endless tabloid speculation. Outsiders labeled him greedy, but to Julian, the fight was about reclaiming what had been stolen, the rightful acknowledgement of his place in history. While the eventual settlement was significant, no amount of money could heal the emotional scars of rejection. Alongside the legal challenges, Julian navigated a more subtle, colder conflict with Yoko Ono. As the keeper of John's legacy, she symbolized all that Julian had lost. Every public encounter became a performance, with smiles masking years of accumulated resentment. For nearly 20 years, every interaction and negotiation reminded him that he remained on the outside, that Yoko controlled the narrative, the memory, and the image of his father. Resentment ran deep, fueled by the belief that she bore responsibility for much of his suffering, and for the father he never truly had. Time, however, slowly softened the edges of anger. Julian realized that fury alone brought no peace. Gradually, small moments began to chip away at the bitterness. A photography exhibit, an unplanned meeting, or an agreement to maintain harmony for Sean's sake. The long-standing feud began to fade, replaced by a fragile truce. Julian and Yoko would never be close, never form family, but he made a conscious choice to stop fighting, not for her, but for his own mental health and for Sean. Over time, his bond with Sean became a stabilizing force, an anchor preventing him from being consumed entirely by resentment. Despite growing up in different worlds, shared pain created a quiet connection. Distance and jealousy eventually gave way to shared understanding, moments of laughter, and mutual respect. Sean's patience, kindness, and acceptance helped Julian see a profound truth. Clinging to hate only prolongs suffering. For the first time, Julian felt a sense of belonging, not simply to a famous name, but to something resembling a family. This realization taught Julian that peace does not require dramatic gestures or reconciliation on grand stages. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through the decision to release the past and move forward. Breaking free from the Lennon shadow was no simple task. Everywhere he went, people measured him against his father, comparing every note, word, and action to a man who was irreplaceable. Music, once his first love, became a heavy expectation. The world wanted another John Lennon, not a new artist with his own voice. Yet Julian chose to rise above the pressure, to reinvent himself and live as his own person. Photography, writing, and private creative projects became his lifeline. In them, he rediscovered his identity. Freed from the weight of his father's fame, Julian no longer sought validation. he began living on his own terms, defining his own narrative. The documentaries, the endless Beatles nostalgia, would always remind him of his origins, yet he refused to allow the past to dictate the man he was becoming. Instead of fleeing from the shadow of his father, he embraced it, transforming it into a source of inspiration through music, art, and resilience that outshone anger. The Lennon name, once a source of burden, evolved into a legacy Julian could carry with quiet pride. His journey does not follow a narrative of instant forgiveness or sudden redemption. It is a story of slow, painstaking healing, of learning to coexist with pain rather than erase it. When he uttered the words, "I utterly hated her," those simple phrases contained decades of heartache, lost years, missed opportunities, and a family fractured by irrevocable choices. Yet, amid the cracks, Julian found something rare: peace. A delicate, hard-won truce with the past allowed him to move forward, finally able to embrace a life not dictated solely by grief or resentment. Julian Lennon's story exposes the unseen costs of fame, the illusion of perfect families, and the courage required to find one's voice beneath the shadow of a legend. It is a narrative that speaks to anyone who has struggled with a painful past or wrestled with the challenges of forgiveness. Healing need not be perfect. It only needs to be genuine. Julian's life demonstrates that even in the aftermath of loss, neglect, and betrayal, it is possible to build something meaningful, to create a sense of belonging, and to reclaim one's own identity. Today, Julian Lennon stands not as a reflection of his father, but as a testament to resilience, creativity, and the human capacity to endure. He has shaped a life that, while indelibly marked by fame and family, is also defined by his choices, his art, and the relationships he has nurtured. His journey serves as a powerful reminder that the shadows of the past, no matter how long or dark, can be transformed into sources of strength. Through music, photography, writing, and the bonds he has forged, Julian has turned pain into purpose, isolation into connection, and legacy into his own story. From the boy overshadowed by a legendary father to a man who reclaimed his narrative, Julian's life reveals the unseen layers of what it truly means to be part of a famous family. It highlights the quiet battles, the emotional complexities, and the personal triumphs that rarely make headlines. His path is a testament to the enduring human spirit, showing that while wounds may never fully disappear, it is possible to find peace, identity, and connection. Julian Lennon's story is not merely about fame or fortune. It is about the courage to survive, to confront the past, and to define one's own future, even under the long, daunting shadow of a legend.